Tim Prister with John Brice outside Notre Dame Stadium. Notre Dame just wrapped up their 8th practice of the spring in the Irish Athletics Center. Had an opportunity to talk to the coordinators, Mike Denbrock and Golden, and then, of course, the corresponding players, the safeties, as well as the tight ends, which is who Mike Denbrock coaches. JB, why don't you go ahead and jump in here? We're in a little bit of a different situation today. Normally we sit down at tables. They were busy upstairs, so we're kind of wandering around the field. You liked it better. I thought it was a little disjointed for us. A little bit more difficult to just put your recorder down and talk to more players. But tell me who you spoke with.
Chaos is a friend, right? I think Notre Dame special teams have some shirts about chaos, so I'm going to lean into that. Spoke some with both Al Golden and Mike Denbrock. Also got to speak some with Cooper Flanagan, Aiden Schuler, as well as Luke Talich. Some really insightful comments today. We also continued to see Riley Leonard working his way back. We didn't see any of practice, but he was out there. He was had been very involved with the practice, some folks said, and then he was just getting some stretches on the side while the rest of the quarterbacks got some practice-ending sprints. So I'll start with that. I'll transition to the fact that both Al Golden and Mike Denbrock discussed the headset implementation. They said there were 5, maybe 6 practices into Notre Dame using the headset communication. Find out officially towards the end of this month if it's going to be adopted. Every coach I've spoken with expects it to be adopted. Many programs around the country are already practicing with it. I'll remind you, Notre Dame practiced with it in December in preparation for the Sun Bowl. Oregon State did not want to use it, therefore Notre Dame could not use it in the Sun Bowl. Mike Denbrock likes it a lot and said he joked that it keeps him from yelling at the other players who aren't on the headset. Said the quarterbacks really like it, that it's easing their ability to pick up the play instead of having to stare at the sideline. And then another note, he said that he thinks once they get the system down, they believe they'll be able to run even more plays, TP.
I spent quite a bit of time with Mitchell Evans. I want to talk about him in a bit, but I want to jump into what Mike Denbrock. I popped in on Mike Denbrock and asked him about, them using more 11 personnel. But mainly I wanted to know, because if from the outside looking in, you look at Notre Dame's roster, and it looks like they've got too many slots and not enough field guys. I mean, plenty of boundaries probably. But he dispelled that a little bit, and I kind of figured that he would. And I found it interesting that the first player that he spoke about in terms of versatility and not being pigeonholed into one of those spots was Jaden Greathouse. I wrote a feature this morning. I'm going to pop back in and use his quote because he spoke very, very highly of his versatility and ability to move around. Jaden Harrison, that's a true slot. Jordan Faison, he's a slot, but he can play to the field side as well. And they have the bigger receivers, for the boundary side. So I think sometimes that's overblown a little bit, and Denbrock revisited his time at LSU or at his previous stop is the way he says it. Yeah. And he said, they weren't pigeonholed into just one guy playing one spot. You move them around, and that's all part of the versatility and the problems that you create for an opponent. So I figured he would dispel that. He added a little bit more to it, and it's good to hear because you're not just tied into that one spot. They can move around, and they do.
I'll say it again. I've said it many times before. The really good coaches tailor their offense to fit their personnel. They don't try to force their personnel to fit their offense, square pegs and round holes and all of that. Mike Denbrock's a really good coach. He's smart. He's been around a long time. He's going to maximize what this offense can do based on the available personnel and the strengths of the personnel on the offensive side of the ball. Numerous players on offense and defense address the increased 11 personnel volume. I think it was Aiden Schuler, or it might have been Luke Talich telling me, almost every single play features a deep route. They just said that it's demanding a lot out of the Notre Dame secondary because they're running more than ever to keep up with the implementation of Notre Dame installing more deep routes. And as for Jaden Greathouse, I'll just quickly chime in. Once again, a point we've made repeatedly, his body control and his football IQ are things that allow him to be able to be utilized both in the slot or as an outside receiver, TP.
Jumping back to Mitchell Evans as it relates to him and his knee injuries, coming along fine. He hopes to be his goal was to be running at the end of the semester. He feels he's right on target with that. He's got a few more weeks before that happens. Interesting because we had heard about, he might have put his name in the draft had he stayed healthy. He said, truth be told, even if he had stayed healthy, he probably would have come back. One of his main goals of coming to Notre Dame was getting his degree. That is going to happen. By the end of this semester. So it's worked out really well. He's coming along. They don't want to project as to will he be ready for the first game. I think he will, quite frankly, as we talk about this more and more. He says he has the people he can rely on. Kevin Bauman and Eli Raridan have had their fair share of ACL tears, but he's feeling good and he's very optimistic about it. We don't want to make any predictions yet. Notre Dame doesn't want him to make any predictions yet, and they're not there. But things are going very well with him.
Well, and to that end, Denbrock praised Mitchell Evans specifically when I asked him about what he's doing mentally and how he's immersing himself still around the team. And he had a lot of really good things to say about Mitchell Evans from a mental preparation and a mental evolution of what he's doing to learn this offense when he's not able to physically get the reps.
Yeah. Talked to Al Golden about Jalen Sneed. Jalen Sneed, to me, if Jalen Sneed can finally lock in, and I say finally, I mean he's really only in his second year of them trying to get him on the field consistently game after game. Let me use some of the words that Al Golden used, which we have not heard in the past. Consistent, settling in, mature, serious. Those are all real positive things. And for me, the reason I wanted to ask him about Jalen Sneed is because as good as this defense is and as great as this defense can be, if you get a fully locked-in Jalen Sneed making an impact, this defense goes to another level.
We talked about it on the podcast Thursday about the increased athleticism on this Notre Dame roster on both sides of the football. But Jalen Sneed can elevate that so much further, so much higher on the defensive side of the ball because of his fast twitch, because of his explosiveness. And again, I'll use that to transition into the fact we continue to hear nonstop about the impact of Lauren Lando on every position group in this Notre Dame football program. Family members have talked about it with other people. There's just so many people talking about what Landau has done. There seems to be a real consensus. Nobody is bashing Matt Balis. They all miss him. But there's a belief among these players that they are more explosive because of Lauren and his staff.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I talked to Jaden Greathouse about that the other day. He, of the hamstring issues last year that really curtailed what would have been an outstanding freshman season as it was. He still caught 18 passes, led the team with 5 touchdown receptions in limited duty. But there's no doubt that he's very confident in what he can do now physically, and part of that has to do with what Lauren Lando. And again, nobody's ripping on Matt Balis. He was without Matt Balis, Notre Dame doesn't go to the playoffs for 2 out of 3 years.
Right.
But guys with hamstrings, he takes every individual player's situation and comes up with a plan that fits him. And Jaden Greathouse needs a different one. Jaden Thomas needs a different one because of their hamstring issues. But I did want to also mention that Al Golden talked about that KVA was brought up, Kingston Viliamuasa. And again, some of the words used, exceptional learner, which doesn't surprise any of us. And he's seen, plenty of that. And then to use the phrase a pro's mentality about an early entry freshman says an awful lot about KVA.
It does, and we saw it at the Army All-American game when I was in San Antonio with T. Loy, and the guy just has a real natural ability, a real instinct. I think his football IQ is high, but there's a difference, I think, between instincts and football IQ, and KVA possesses both of those, along with a physical skill set that allows him to flow to the football and make some big plays. And as he gets more and more comfortable, you start to hear more and more buzz about him, and that he can carve a role on this team in some capacity in the fall, whether that's being a starter on multiple special teams units or what have you. He's a guy that just continues to generate consistent buzz, along with Brice Young. We heard the positivity on Jalen Sneed today, and we just continue to see that, and I'll use that to transition into another guy that we touched on briefly Thursday and Wednesday in our video analysis in our podcast. We continue to hear really good things about CJ Carr, TP, and I'm not ready to say that he's the number 3 quarterback, but you want to talk about somebody that's mature beyond his years, and that's the consensus on CJ Carr.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it in the other day in the podcast. I would not be surprised if he is number 3, or depending upon how many quarterbacks are here in the fall, probably won't be 4. So we'll see about that. Wrapping up here from outside Notre Dame Stadium. Notre Dame just completed its 8th practice of the spring. We're past the halfway point. This has been Irish Illustrated's Instant Analysis.